everyone, and welcome to our third sprint. Today, we will start our program with innovation training, which will give you guidance on how to move forward with your challenges and how to create outstanding ideas. Before we will jump into the training, I would like to remind you a few things. After the training, we will have the different session rooms like yesterday on the left side of the Hopin platform, where you will be able to continue your collaboration with your team and work together with the audio and video solution. All our Sprint official communication is on Alter State Slack channel. And after your training, you will find the presentation there as well. If you have any questions, please use Slack to ask us. We have the help desk section to answer all your questions. And right now, I wish you a wonderful training, and Ina will introduce to all activities waiting for you in this evening.
So the first sprint is actually dedicated to framing of the challenge from the customer perspective, as well as idea generation. Those two goals are the main outcome of this sprint, and our mentors will evaluate your results based on it. So I think let's go ahead and jump into the presentation. So allow me to introduce you to the Sprint 1 methodology created by Alter State. In a rapidly changing world, we are tempted. We're tempted to solve challenges that are reactions to the symptoms that we see in front of us. We are trying to solve challenges that are essentially just day-to-day frustrations. For example, a delivery service proves that is not really fast enough for us. We're standing in the queue and it becomes really annoying to wait that whole time, or it just takes ages to get through the customer services. And it is that urge that drives us to take action and to solve the challenge. And it is a really good and powerful thing. It's essentially our source of inspiration. But where we usually fail is to recognize that it is merely a symptom of a bigger challenge behind it. We think that what's in front of us is the true problem. And we're not the only ones thinking like that. There's actually loads and loads of startups everywhere, consistently creating what I would call bullshit products. Think about the fact that there's actually an app out there that is for proposals. So what we want to avoid by creating Alter State is just another set of bullshit products. We want to give you the tools and the capability to think beyond the symptomatic challenges. And another thing that we're noticing out there is that a lot of challenges are considered applicable to technologies, and we think that we could just apply any type of technology and solve them. That is often not the case. Majority of the challenges can be solved by changing the policy. They're fundamentally behavior challenges, so we need to consider the mental models and the values that people carry when they are operating within the system. And we need to consider how they interlink with each other. So it's not just about pure technological solutions, it's actually about behavioral problems. And last but not least, we need to consider that not all problems need solving and not all ideas are worth making. Innovation is about creating valuable solutions and applying them in reality. And we really need to think that innovation is not really spared just for the creative ones. Every person can be an innovator, but it takes a huge discipline to apply specific types of methodologies and to apply critical type of thinking in every day-to-day challenge that we face. So innovation exists in every industry, and it's something that can and should be used as a vehicle to create better futures. Now, what we want to offer you is a platform to think about the right challenges and to actually solve them with right solutions. Alter State has been focusing on SDG challenges, and those are fundamentally the ones that will have really long-term impact. There are things like quality education and gender equality, good health and well-being, and many, many other areas that we want to focus on. And we believe that they are the ones that will make a difference for generations to come. But because they're SDG challenges, we truly need to consider what is happening beyond the symptomatic solutions. So what we want to give you is a toolkit, and it's a toolkit for critical and creative innovation thinking and making. This is not a toolkit that we invented ourselves. It's actually a series of techniques that have been invented by reputable agencies in the industry and companies who focus on innovation making. But they're also techniques that we have applied in our day-to-day professional experience, and they've proven for us truly valuable in making sure that we're solving the right challenges with the right solutions. You will hear me say this quite a lot throughout this. So the journey that we want you to take is quite a simple one. And we're going to split it into different stages. We're going to start off by understanding what is your challenge and what is your insight. We're then going to define and create your vision and your concept. And then we're going to move on into establishing a solution as well as your first minimum viable product. And the last stage of the process asks us to think about the release and improvement of the service of the product that we create. So we will really need to consider what is the business model behind your idea and how will it evolve over time. So don't worry, we're taking it step by step. So today is about understanding your challenge and defining that vision or concept for the future. During the break between the two sprints, you're going to have a chance to come up with multiple variations of your solution and consider what is that bare minimum stripped down version that you could create to launch it into the market. And then in the second sprint, we're going to delve into much deeper into the actual business model. So what does today look like? Well, we've got quite a few techniques to share with you, so we're going to go through this in quite a speedy manner. That does not mean that you cannot revisit these techniques. Please do. This is essentially just exposing you to some of the methods that you could be using in this type of setup. And of course, there are techniques out there that could be used as an alternative, but this is almost like a bare minimum. It's your skeleton to start thinking in the right direction. For us, to jump into this, one of the key things that needs to happen is actually the evaluation of the challenge itself. There are many techniques in the industry that are used as a means to understand the challenge at hand. Some of those techniques are divergent, so they use expansive thinking, and some of them are convergent, so it means that they are using the reductive thinking. But fundamentally, all of these techniques have a different purpose. So what we're trying to say here is in order to get to the right answers, it's important to realize what space does your challenge sit in. If you're trying to solve global challenge with problem-solving approaches, you could result in products and services that might be somewhat useless. And they're probably not going to have an impact on the wider systems, sometimes even making the situation worse. And if you're trying to solve day-to-day challenges with what we call systematic approaches, you could very easily result in overcomplicated solutions to a simple problem. So for us, it does not matter if your challenge is big or small. It matters if you understand whether it should be solved in the first place and how complex it is. And as we say, one of the key things that tends to happen is that any team, any person, any company, or even large corporation in the industry can be tempted by what we call simple challenges. And it's not to say that some of these examples out there, haven't earned billions by doing what they do, but they also have created certain things or have rippled down negative effects throughout the society and the planet that we should consider before we go into solving these challenges. So I already mentioned to you the proposal app, and it's a prime example for me of someone solving a challenge that did not need to be solved. Facebook, even though it is an incredible social media platform, kind of one of the first few that emerged there in the market, it did have some unintended consequences. Originally, it was created as a place for people to connect, have much easier connections, be able to communicate with each other, and essentially track each other's life. What it didn't consider really is true social isolation, the fact that it would lose tangible, real life connections, the fact that lots and lots of people are actually now facing mental problems because they're consistently having the fear of missing out and they're consistently seeing other people advance in their life. Um, and we have a somewhat similar challenge with the electric cars now emerging in the industry. Um, on the surface, having an electric car seems like the perfect solution to the global um, CO2 problems. If in principle, if everyone had an electric car, we would dramatically reduce the pollution. However, now there is actually an argument out there in the industry saying that to produce an electric car, to actually run an electric car, and to be able to charge it, um, it pretty much could use the same equivalent amount of energy as any other fuel sources. So in principle, on the surface, is actually a really good solution, but it doesn't really address the illness. So, what we would like you to achieve today. Today, in terms of going through the exercises, there's three key components that you need to get to. One is a really clear definition of the challenge. We want you to have a clear understanding and insightful investigation of it. We want you to define your audience. So we really want you to consider and understand what value would you create by solving this challenge. And last but not least is the actual definition of your solution. So we want you to be able to come up with these initial ideas of how you could address the challenge. So let's delve into the first block of the methodologies, which are all about understanding your challenge. The questions that we want you to answer here is, what is the world that your challenge sits in? What's the challenge you are trying to solve? Really? Is it a challenge worth solving? Has anyone solved this challenge before, and what can you learn from it? Who are you solving this challenge for? And what is your insight? Quite a few questions to get through, but do not worry. All of the information around the methodologies will be provided for you within the slideshare. And at the same time, all of the methodology templates are replicated within the mural board. So whenever you're in doubt, feel free to refer back to this same slideshare or to the mural board itself. We will have instructions provided for you step by step, so you will be able to go through them. I will give you a rather quick overview of what's going on here, and then afterwards you'll be able to ask questions. The methodologies that we want to provide you with to understand your challenge are what we call an iceberg model, impact mapping, sense making, behavioral journey mapping, and how might we questions. Let's start with the first one. So the iceberg model is an exercise that is usually used to understand the illness behind the symptoms. And you will hear us saying this quite a lot throughout. We want to make sure that you're not just identifying an event, but you're going behind it and understanding the real causes that are hidden from the plain sight. So an iceberg model is a tool that allows you to shift your perspective and see beyond the immediate events that everyone notices. It helps you to uncover root causes of why those events happen. This exercise should take no more than 45 minutes, and it comes from the world of systems thinking. In principle, what it looks like is essentially as an iceberg. The first step is to identify some of the events that are related to your challenge. So let's go through the examples step by step, and I think it will become very, very clear what's going on here. So let's say that the event is catching a cold. That is essentially answering the question of what just happened. If we take the second step, we would want you to start identifying what are the patterns and the trends behind this event. So the question to answer here is, what trends have there been over time? So an example could be, I've been catching colds when sleeping less. Now we want to go a level down, a level deeper. We want to start looking at the underlying structures that shape these patterns or these trends. So what has influenced the patterns? What are the relationships between the parts? An example would be, maybe I've been having more stress at work. Maybe I've not been eating well. Potentially, I've been having difficulty accessing healthy food near home or work. And all of these different structures have been causing a trend over time. Now, if we go another level down, another level deeper, then we would be actually asking a question around mental models. So, what assumptions, beliefs, and values do people hold about the system, and what beliefs keep the system in place? Um, an example in here could be that career is actually the most important piece of our identity. Healthy food is too expensive, and rest is for the unmotivated. You can instantly start seeing that if you were to just solve the challenge that you're seeing up front, which is an event, your solution could be probably something very simple, like actually providing, I don't know, an app for people tracking how when their colds happen, and giving them advice on what to do in that instance. However, if we truly dig deeper into what's causing it in the root location, we would be addressing the challenge in a very, very different way. We would be thinking how to change the mental models of people in regards to their career, in regards to the healthy food and how it's being provided to the society. Um, and how do you change the construct of us thinking that rest is actually for the unmotivated? How do you make people consider their health in the first place? Now, you could solve a challenge on any of the three layers beyond the water. You could choose to anticipate, you could choose to design something for the underlying problems, or you could choose to fundamentally transform the industry. It's up to you. But our challenge to you is go beyond the reactions. So the second exercise that we want you to try is what we call impact mapping. The point of this exercise is to define the impact that you could create by solving the challenge at hand. It's a rather quick exercise, only worth 15 minutes, but it's a truly important one. What we want you to consider is three different layers of impact that you could have on people, society, as well as planet. So let's start with people. The point here is to look at your target audience or your target clients and consider their needs and behaviors. The questions to answer here is, how would people get directly or indirectly affected by this? Who is this for? Who is excluded? And most importantly, how might we empower people to make good choices? The second layer of impact mapping is about society. So this is about understanding impact on infrastructure, communities, their culture, values, and fundamental beliefs. And the important question to answer here is, how might we cater to these societal needs? The last layer is about the planet. So what kind of global governance do we affect? Do we affect ecology as well? And the question to answer is, how might we reduce the use of resources? And what would the ecological footprint be? After answering those three questions, it will become very clear how far does your challenge reach and how far you could potentially reach if you were to solve it in different ways. The third exercise is what we call sense making. And the point of this exercise is to look outwards. So consider how others have solved this challenge in the past and how are they likely to solve this challenge in the future. It's essentially about looking at the signals that we can identify in our industry or society at the moment, and making sense of those signals that we can notice so far, and kind of also at the same time imagining what could be the signals in the future. We expect you to take no more than 30 minutes for this exercise, but in principle, the key steps that you need to take here is, first of all, think about the now and think about what's going on in the current industry in terms of trends, in terms of products and services that are emerging, considering, what value do they focus on, how do they go about it, and why. Then go into the next step and think about the future. So what trends can you see changing and evolving? Third, notice what is the true change in the value that's going on between now and the future. And last, consider what it could mean for you. So just to take you very quickly through the example, let's say we had a challenge on dating. If we were to consider the current situation or current circumstances, we could say that people are most of the time now meeting virtually. There are matchmaking algorithms out there. It's all about instant gratification, and online presence actually starting to matter more than the reality. In the future, though, we could see quite the opposite, or we are starting to notice the interest in quite the opposite. We see that slow dating is emerging. There's a lot of focus on emotional intelligence. The point might be not about having lots of partners, but quality partners. And dating could even be seen as a learning experience. So, if we were to define the change in value, we could see that there is a movement, or we could notice that there is a movement from committed relationships, potentially to polyamory, and there's a move from fast dating to slow dating. What that would mean for us if we were now trying to solve a challenge on dating? Well, it could mean that there will be no more dating apps. And it could be that best partners are selected for you by artificial intelligence algorithm through lifelong observation. What you're seeing here is not us kind of making up certain future trends, is us bringing to the table our own experience, our own knowledge, our own observations, and making intelligent guesses of how certain industries are likely to evolve. That's the whole point of the exercise. Use the collective intelligence in the room to identify these future trends and to identify the value that you could utilize and create upon. The fourth exercise that we would like you to try is what we call a behavioral journey mapping. The point of it is to define what is the journey that your users go through in order to achieve their desired outcomes. This is actually an adaptation of a classical and traditional customer journey mapping, but in here we are borrowing some of the principles of fog behavior model. You'll see what that looks like just in a second. The point of this exercise is essentially to look at end-to-end experience of your users, your target audience, and identify what are the key steps that they go through. Afterwards, you would be asked to take each step one at a time and identify what motivates them at this particular point. So just to give you an example, if we were to solve a challenge on travel, some of the key steps that a person would be doing is, first of all, considering traveling to another country, then probably talking to their friends about their experiences. Third would be searching or browsing some of those experiences in the internet, etc., etc. And what would motivate them at this particular point, at that beginning of the journey, is, for example, a busy work schedule or them seeking new experiences, wanting to spend more time with family and others. The motivation is going to be highly dependent on the users that you have identified through impact mapping exercise. For each type of user, it's likely that the motivation is going to be different. Some of the motivations could be financial, some of them could be emotional, practical, self-actualization, you name it. Now, the third layer of the exercise is all about understanding the emotion at that particular point in the journey. So, do people feel anxious or tired or overwhelmed at this point? Or are they curious and happy and excited about the next stage to come? All of these criteria or all of these layers that we want you to map out matter because they will give you an insight into what's going on in the user's world. Do we need to communicate them in a specific way? Do we need to create them certain types of features? That's exactly what this exercise is going to give you. Now, you could take that exercise to a different level. And this is where we apply the Fogg behavioral model to its full extent. Essentially, rather than just mapping out their motivations, you could also be looking at what kind of abilities do the users have at different points and what is triggering them into action. So you're hitting through all of the key criteria of behavior change when you're looking at your journey. Just to give you an example, the ability is essentially defining everything that allows you to act upon your motivation. So, in the travel experience example, ability would be talking to your friends and finding an article in the newspaper that is advertising about a journey, or you coming across a new Instagram story that is inspiring. A trigger could be anything, and again, it very much depends on your target audience. It could be pure jealousy of your coworkers or friends taking a trip that you always wanted to take. It could be that you have just completed a project at work and now you're ready to take a break. It's up to you to define what those key steps are, what motivations are, what abilities, triggers, emotions, and insights are. My advice to you would be focus on the key steps first, and then make sure that you cover motivation, emotion, and insights. And if you have the time, then look at the ability and trigger because it's likely going to prompt new ideas. So up until this point, you had a chance to look at your challenge from multiple different perspectives. And you might be feeling just a little bit overwhelmed because what you're essentially been doing, divergent thinking. What we want you to do now with this exercise is to turn those challenges into what we call how might we questions. The way that the exercise works is that you're going to have some space in the mural board, free floating, for each one of you in quiet to think of as many how might we questions as you want. You will then discuss them as a team and select the three most important ones that you would want to transfer into the sprint mural board. Think of all of these questions individually, but then use all of the material that you have gathered so far to make your decisions. So the second stage of today's sprint is about creating your idea. And the point of this section is actually to be creative. In here, what we're trying to do here is to give you different types of techniques that would help you break your pattern of thinking. And essentially, there is this traditional English saying to get you out of your box. So we're going to share with you one particular technique that we would want you to apply here, but there's also others that are available in this presentation that you will be able to look at later on. The ideation technique that we would like you to apply is called Crazy 8. So the way that it works is your team is going to choose a how might we question. From the previous exercise, you would have arrived at this point with probably 2 or 3 questions at hand. We want you to consider whether to narrow it down, to connect it all together, or to maybe choose one particular one that suits your needs best. We would then ask you to go to a dedicated mural area with your names and 8 rectangles. You're going to set the timer to 60 seconds, and each one of you is going to have exactly 60 seconds per section for a total of 8 minutes to create 8 miniature sketches. Each sketch is essentially a different way to solve your challenge. At the end of this exercise, what we want you to do is to come back to the team and to present your 3 best ideas. Afterwards, you'll probably start noticing that some of those ideas overlap with each other, some of them complement each other, and what you want to do is vote on the best and select the potential solutions. Quite a simple exercise, super speedy exercise, yet at the same time pushes you to your boundaries purely because of the time constraint as well as the number of ideas constraint. There are also other techniques available, as mentioned before. There's one technique called association. In this technique, what you're doing is using random words or random images to ideate in teams. And you would pull a random word or image and generate ideas for 2 minutes around it. You would then pull another one and do it all over again. You could also do what's called negative brainstorming. This is a particularly freeing exercise because what you're allowed to do is to come up with the most horrible ideas ever, or the ones that you think would no way solve the challenge at hand. You come up with those ideas and then you invert them. You come up with the complete opposite of them. And that's the whole point of it. That exercise is to put on a hat of a particular company and to try and think like that particular actor. And how would they approach a challenge? You could think like Google, Nike, the Kickstarter project, United Nations, local governments, IKEA, any company you want. But again, it's a good exercise that you can limit yourselves to a particular time and just imagine what would they do in these particular circumstances. Fourth exercise to try is taking on a user perspective. So explore the focus question from the perspective of specific users. What would it look like for a 15-year-old boy, or for your grandmother, or for someone else? Consider those different target audiences and how would you solve a challenge particular for them. You could imagine that there's many different ways how to address it. Last exercise, probably one of my favorites, is what's called a mashup. So the mashup approach requires you to come up with a number of different technologies that you know, a number of different needs that relate to your challenge, and a number of different services that exist out there. You would then mix and match them completely randomly and see what comes up. It's a particularly good exercise to push you out of your comfort zone. As I said, all of these techniques, they're available for you, but don't feel like you need to use them. Your go-to exercise is the Crazy 8. And then afterwards, we're going to see how we narrow down those ideas. So where will this allow us to get to by the end of the day? One, we need to make sure that you have a clear definition of the challenge. Two, we need you to have a definition of your audience. And three, we need you to have a definition of your solution. Those three things will be the criteria that the mentors are going to evaluate you against. In terms of the definition of the challenge, look back at the exercises such as iceberg model, journey mapping, sense making, and how might we. For the definition of your audience, look at impact mapping. That's going to help you in particular. And then for the definition of your solution, it's either the Sense 8 creative exercise or some of the other ideation techniques. Now, by the end of today, we want you to summarize your ideas. So we want you to create and present your results on a maximum, absolute maximum 2-minute video. Again, it should cover challenge, audience, and solution. The way that you should do this is create a set of slides, probably no more than 3. Don't worry about the graphics. Don't worry about the design or the quality of how the slides are shaped up. Worry about the quality of your answer. But film yourselves presenting your slides and answering those 3 key criteria and upload that video to an unlisted video YouTube channel. You will find some of these instructions detailed in your participants pack, but I'm just repeating those details here just for your awareness. Send that video to demante@alterstate.org or through a direct Slack message to Demante Gutowskaite. You should do this by 9 p.m. as the latest. For any kind of questions related to the challenges or the methodologies, or to any kind of things that you are misunderstanding or struggling with, feel free to post a question in the Slack channel called #teamquestions. And again, any kind of things that are related to the actual summary of your presentation, that goes to the YouTube channel to Diamante.
Thank you, Anna, for such an insightful training. Just to recap it all, we have been presented with activities which we are free to choose and accomplish during the sprint. At the end of this first sprint at 9 p.m., the organizers should receive your maximum 2 minutes long videos about your problem from the customer's perspective and your idea on how to solve it. Please send them to Diamante via email diamante@thealterstate.org, or if something doesn't work, just by a personal message via Slack. And we will share this presentation with you after the broadcast ends on our Slack channel.
So good luck to you all. We're looking forward to receiving your videos by 9 p.m. Enjoy the processes and good luck in creating your solutions.